So do we want to talk about Zizek and Peterson, or?
Yeah. Since we're at a transition point, let me just say that you are listening to C-Realm Radio on WOOL 91.5 FM, Bellows Falls, Vermont, and I'm KMO, your host, speaking with Doug Lain, who I didn't really even introduce at all at the top of the program. So, Doug, before you launch into Zizek and Jordan Peterson, say a little bit about yourself and Zero Books.
Okay, so my name is Douglas Lain. I'm the publishing manager of Zero Books, which is a critical theory imprint out of the UK, but I'm the American publishing manager and publicist. I'm also the podcaster for Zero Books, and I guess the YouTuber for Zero Books, and I'm also a science fiction writer. I have a novel coming out this month from Nightshade Books, called Bash Bash Revolution. I've written a few other novels, and that's who I am. And recently, critical theory and Marxism has been getting a big boost from Jordan Peterson, who has been rising in the ranks. He's got a number 1 or number 2 bestseller on Amazon called 12 Rules for Life or something, and he's been touring the country and going on many programs denouncing critical theory and Neo-Marxism and
cultural
postmodernism. And well, I think he stopped using the term cultural Marxism.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, because that has a history behind it, which is not pretty, that term. And so, but yeah, cultural Marxism is really what he's talking about. And he's been sort of rising based on bashing the universities and certain kind of critical theory and philosophical perspective.
He himself is a university professor, so he's not bashing everything about universities.
No, but he's a pretty big critic of of the university system right now. So, so that's Peterson, and I've been critiquing Peterson for about a year. I'm making a video here and there, talking about what I didn't like about Jordan Peterson and what I did like about Jordan Peterson and what I thought was important to recognize about his work. And,
well, what's one thing from each of those categories?
Okay, so to start with what I like about Jordan Peterson, what I like about Jordan Peterson is that he's challenging the liberal consensus at times in ways that seem to me to be legitimate, in terms of the search for meaning in the modern world. That he is a Jungian psychologist, and that means for him the most important thing for an individual to discover is what gives their life a sense of meaning and purpose, what they're driven towards, what their life project is, and what's significant to them. And he has a course called Maps of Meaning, and he has given many lectures on the significance of Jungian archetypes and myth. And while I don't subscribe to a Jungian perspective, I think that it's important for liberals to recognize the basic need that humans have to create narratives and ideas that give their lives a sense of meaning and purpose, and that we often fall into a sort of unconscious utilitarian approach to life. Just what gives our life purpose is whatever is pleasurable. And I think you can certainly go deeper than that, and I think that's necessary. It's necessary even for liberal or left-leaning projects to grapple with meaning. So that's what I like about Jordan Peterson. What I don't like about Jordan Peterson is that he is fundamentally very conservative, that he's espousing Jungian ideas in order to shore up contradictions in the system as it is, that the meanings that he wants people to produce are ones that will support them as individuals, but that don't have much of a chance to push for social change or give people the power and the freedom to change the terms of their life, and not that changing those terms is easy or is without risk, but that I feel, from my perspective, that movements for social change are incredibly necessary right now. So that would be what I like about him and what I don't like about him. The third thing to mention is that the reason I started talking about him is because I thought he was a good example for left-wingers like myself of a worthy adversary. Maybe not an entirely honest adversary, maybe not the most rigorous adversary, but a worthy one, because I saw him about a year ago as being someone who was worth watching, because he was probably going to gain more and more cultural cachet. He was probably going to become more and more significant as a figure, is what I thought.
And you thought
right. I was right about that. He's even far outpaced what I would have predicted. So I just thought the left should be aware of why his message is resonating with people, and not just dismiss him as yet another alt-right figure, or somehow equate him with people like Richard Spencer or even Ben Shapiro or someone like that, who, by the way, don't belong in the same sentence anyway, those two. But the point is that the left is quick to vilify and just sort of slap the label of fascist on anyone who's a conservative or a reactionary even today, which is a mistake. So that was the other reason I wanted to talk about him as much as I have. At this point, I'm almost done talking about him for a while, but this will maybe be a way to close out my obsession with. I've said this so many times, but this is the way to close out my obsession with Peterson, unless something big happens again.
Well, for a time there was the possibility that you would be talking to Jordan Peterson for your own podcast.
Yeah. Yes. And that technically is still a possibility, but I have not heard back from his team, and I have not been pestering them with emails either. I should probably write them yet again to see if I can schedule a date. But at this point, I don't expect that to happen. What originally happened was about a month or so before his book was to come out, I emailed his publicist asking for an interview, and I sent a very standard interview request email. I have a template for that, and I got a response back saying that they would be glad to do it, but that they, would like to do it around the time his book was coming out, which was fine. So we were scheduled for January 24th to have like an hour-long conversation. Now, in my email, I mentioned that we were a critical theory imprint, that we published Kill All Normies, and that I had questions and concerns about the way he was representing Marxism and postmodernism, and wanted to talk about Nietzsche as well. And so I sort of laid my cards on the table from the very beginning that this would be a somewhat adversarial interview and a kind of debate about particular issues. And that didn't seem to be a problem for his publicist, but then they canceled the 24th date and haven't rescheduled. And then since then, I'll say this much, Peterson has been going around promoting his book, and one of the stops on his podcast tour was Joe Rogan's podcast, which is enormously popular. And on that podcast, Rogan asked him if he had ever debated a Marxist, or an equality of outcome Marxist is what they describe Marxists as people who want equality of outcome. We can discuss whether or not that's true. But Peterson said to Rogan that he hadn't debated Marx or these ideas with any supporter of Marx because none of us would debate him. None of us were willing to talk to him. None of us had ever asked him. And he said this after his team and I had scheduled an interview. So the fact that just wasn't true.